That's assuming you would actually pay off the debts. And that's probably not going to be the case. They'll just default, as they usually do. But we do see gold going up to probably around 10,000 going into 32. What's happening with gold and why, like, China has been acquiring gold, etc. It's because it's neutral. The risk of war going forward.
The global financial system is entering a period in which debt, war, and confidence are becoming more important than traditional inflation numbers. Martin Armstrong, a veteran market forecaster, argues that governments are not truly planning to pay down their debts. Instead, they continue rolling debt forward like a Ponzi structure, while interest costs keep rising and begin crowding out military spending, social programs, and long term stability. This connection to gold sets the stage for Armstrong's key argument. In his view, gold is not rising simply because prices are going up. Gold rises when confidence in government debt, currencies, and political leadership begins to break down. He even says gold could move towards $10,000 going into 2032, driven by uncertainty, sovereign debt stress, and growing geopolitical risk. He also explains why central banks like China are buying gold. Gold is natural, it is not another country's liability, cannot be sanctioned, and does not rely on a government that could default. As war risk grows and trust falters, gold becomes both a political and financial asset. Now we present the Martin's interview. Before we discuss this, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell icon. Thank you and enjoy the video.
You can't fix the price of gold and not the quantity of dollar. Obviously, it's going to go bust. The only kind of a gold standard, per se, or backing of a currency that would be possible is it has to float. In other words, okay, fine, you got dollars, you can convert it to gold. Gold's 5,000 today, fine. But you can't fix it because everything in the world economy fluctuates. It goes up, it goes down. I mean, that's reality. The idea of a gold standard was completely different when you go back to Gresham, etc. At that point in time, there was no single superpower. Okay, so there wasn't a premium to the currency. The exchange rate was based solely on the metal content between countries. That was it. And that's what he was talking about with Henry VIII debasing the currency. Bad money drives out the good. As people then start hoarding the higher quality. We saw that with Rome, etc. If you go back and you look at, ancient coins tell us a lot. The coinage of Athens. Athens was like the major power after defeating Persia. So you see imitations of their coinage from Asia. Even Egypt imitated their coinage. They didn't counterfeit it. They struck coins of the same quality for international trade. When Rome took over, you see the same thing. India was the source of, they used to imitate Roman gold coins all the time for hundreds of years. That raises the issue. If they had gold, why didn't they strike their own coin? And the reason is that the Roman Empire was kind of like the United States in that it was the biggest economy. Everybody wanted to sell to to Rome as they want to sell their Toyotas and BMWs to America. So it had a premium to it because it was the powerful entity in the world at the time. I've been to Greece and went to go buy something and knew I was American. They said, look, I'll give you 10% off if you pay me in dollars. Why? Because Europe routinely cancels their currency. Part of the reason the dollar is also the reserve currency and 70% of our paper dollars are outside the country is because we've never canceled our currency. If you got a note from like 30 years ago from Britain, it's no good. They cancel it routinely. Why? Because Europe is particularly Marxist. Let's say you had a couple 100,000 euros and you got them in your safety deposit box. They come out, they cancel the currency. You now have to bring that to the bank and say, give me the new one. And then they go, oh, gee, where'd you get this? Okay, did you pay your taxes? This is what they do routinely. And that's why, in part, the dollar is the reserve currency because they can hold it and trust it that it's not going to be canceled. They don't, do that with euros. Even British pounds. Canada canceled all its high denomination notes a couple years ago. This is what they do to go get, what they say, the rich. So it's just part of their policy. Right now, you have Christine Lagarde in Europe saying, making it a criminal act if you bought something more than €1,000 and you paid in cash. Spain, and you need government permission to pull out €3,000 from your account. So they're always, against cash over there. The central bank, this is why they are buying gold. They don't have to worry about currencies canceling, and also the fact that you definitely do not want to buy the debt of somebody that you're in war with. Going to Beijing and say, here, we want to buy some bonds so I can buy some missiles to shoot your ass, That's, what Blinken did by taking Russia out of the SWIFT system. That's assuming you would actually pay off the debts. And that's probably not going to be the case. They'll just default, as they usually do. But we do see gold going up to probably around 10,000 going into 32. But the problem that you historically see is that governments always end up defaulting. And once you get into these Ponzi schemes, the interest will continue to accumulate to the point that you're spending more in interest than you're on anything else. Like I said, we've already exceeded military. Then it crowds out any social spend, Social Security. Oh, it's not an end game here. I mean, like I said, a 3-year-old with a pocket calculator can figure out this is not going to end nicely. Look, I've dealt with governments for close to 50 years, and this is the difference. You can ask me a question, I tell you, you learn from your past mistake. Government does not. Why? Because government constantly is changing. I was called in to create the euro. I told them you have to consolidate the debt. Back in 98, they told me, we understand, but we just got to get the euro in, and they needed the bureaucracy first. And they'll worry about the debt later. Here we are almost 30 years later, and they still haven't done it. This goes to the dollar reserve status, etc. If I'm a fund manager, I got $10 billion. I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $10 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. No problem. Europe, it's a facade. They never consolidated the debt. So consequently, I have to make the same decision as if the euro didn't exist. Do I want Germany? Do I want France? Do I want Italy? Back then they refused to consolidate the debt because Helmut Kohl wouldn't allow it. He took Germany into the euro unilaterally and didn't allow the German people to vote. Before he died, he admitted he acted like a dictator. And he said if he allowed the German people to vote, he would have lost 7-3 and there would never have been a euro. So he blocked any consolidation of the debt because the German people would see it as bailing out Greece or Italy or something. So that's why the euro's never been able to compete with the dollar. There is no centralized debt. The U.S. debt market is the deepest in the world. And because the dollar is the reserve, all right, you can go on eBay and you can look at buy Chinese bonds before World War I. They were issued in British pounds because they had to go to London to raise money. Today, all these emerging markets come to New York to raise money and they issue it in dollars. So it's not just the U.S. debt. It's the fact that the U.S. is also the financial capital of the world, just like London used to be. So private debt, they have to come to New York to sell it. So that's what is the backbone of the dollar, per se. It's more than, fiat. No, all currencies are fiat. And it's debatable whether it's even fiat, because fiat says the government dictates, and it's a free market. They all float, so they don't dictate the value. Probably will be revised where that's not necessarily the case. But what makes the dollar the reserve currency is nothing that U.S. government does per se, other than not canceling the currency. The U.S. is the largest consumer-based economy in the world. So everybody's got to sell their products here. So when you do that, you still have to price it in dollars. Russia is the richest country in the world from a natural resource perspective, but it's in the ground. That doesn't make them the reserve currency. We heard all the nonsense about the petrodollar. Really, if the petrodollar the dollar was strong because it was backed by oil, then why isn't Saudi Arabia the reserve currency? It's the economy. It's the same thing as I was saying about the Roman economy. Rome lasted for 1,000 years. Why? Because if you had a shop in France and you were making vases, it was free trade. All, roads led to Rome. You could then make that vase and sell it to somebody in Syria. If you weren't part of the Roman Empire, you couldn't do that. That's why it lasted for a long time. And this is what I've tried to to get through to politicians in Washington, but it seems to go in one ear and out the other. If you want world peace, you do not use sanctions. You bring Russia into the system, because then what you'll get is the average Russian businessman is going to say, what are you, crazy? You do this and I'm going to be out of business. That's the way to do it. They think putting sanctions on them will force those people to rise up and overthrow their government. And that has never happened. It didn't happen in Iraq, all right? Oh, the people rise up, and they really believe this bullshit. They think they're going to get a ticker tape parade. I've heard about Russia. Oh, if we overthrow Putin, the Russian people rise up and cheer and say thank you. No, they will not. You're not seeing that in Iran. It's always the same scenario these people put out. But please show me one time when they've ever been correct. I can't find it.
The deeper issue is that the dollar's reserve status is not just about fiat money or oil. It is tied to the size of the US economy, the debt of the treasury market, and the fact that global trade still prices around dollars. Armstrong compares this to Rome, where the strongest economy naturally attracted trade, capital, and confidence. But he warns that sanctions are weakening the very system they are meant to protect. Cutting countries out of financial networks forces them to seek alternatives, including gold. He argues that sanctions do not create peace. They divide economies and increase the risk of conflict. The real danger is a sovereign debt crisis. Once interest costs exceed key government spending areas, the system becomes harder to sustain. That is where uncertainty rises, and historically, that is when gold begins to accelerate. Now, let's get back to the interview.
If you actually look at the national debt, we're still paying interest on World War I and II. The vast majority of the national debt has been largely to fund all these neocon endless wars. Vietnam, Korea. I mean, it never stopped. So these people, I know some of them. Bill Kristol's father, Irving, started the whole neocon movement. I know Bill, he even spoke at one of our conferences. It was Bill Kristol who wrote the book to justify going into Iraq. Iran has always been on the top of their list. I think it was General Wesley Clark. You can see him also on YouTube. I think a speech he gave in 2007. After 9/11, he went to the Pentagon and they told him that they were going into Iraq. And he said, oh, you tied Saddam to 9/11? They said, no, we're just going in. He was also informed that they had intended to go from there into Iran and 7 countries in total. This is the neocon movement. As you're seeing with Iran, it's the same scenario. They tell whoever's president. Cheney back then said in an interview that going into Iraq, oh no, it's only going to be a matter of weeks, not months. And turned out to be 8 years. They're saying the same thing again. And I really think that's why Trump has been kind of hoodwinked into this. I think he thought it was going to be another Venezuela. In, out, over with. This is a completely different situation. So the computer's not showing that this is going to be short, sweet, and to the point. It's going to be long and dragged out. These people are going to continue to escalate the national debts. And then you have Europe, which is intent on a war with Russia because they're also economically, imploding. So on top of all this, we have effectively a sovereign debt crisis. We've been borrowing since World War II with no intention of paying anything back. So you're constantly rolling the national debt like in a Ponzi scheme. So our interest expenditures this year have exceeded military. That's not going to stop. All right. The end of this is a sovereign default. And it's happened many, many times throughout history. This is why gold has been going up. I've said before, if you look, gold doesn't go up really because of inflation. Gold goes up because of uncertainty. And I saw that going into 1980. Gold went from 176 up to 400 by, the end of 79. But it then went from 400 to 875 in the last 6 weeks. Why? That's when Russia invaded Afghanistan. I've learned over the years, we have probably the largest international client base of anybody. In the 70s, we were really the first to start forecasting currency. Currency futures just began in 1972. I happen to have known a senior VP at Franklin National Bank. And that was the bank that started MasterCard, but it was the first bank to go down after the fall of Bretton Woods because they lost 10% on the Italian lira. So after that, pretty much any currency issue was like, get the guy that did that one. We got called in and asked to do a model on the Lebanese pound by the central bank there. And they found a ledger. Somebody put all the prices down into mid 1800s. So we put it in. And I thought there was something wrong with the data. And I called them. I said, look, the computer says your country's going to fall apart in 8 days. And very calmly, they said to me, well, what currency does it recommend? I said, well, the Swiss franc. 8 days later, civil war began. So obviously they saw the capital moving themselves. They only really came to me for the time. After that, we had a client who was one of the biggest shippers of oil, etc., tankers in the Gulf. And he called and said, what do you think gold's going to do tomorrow? Iraq's going to start attacking shipping in the Gulf. As you tell me, a war's going to start tomorrow? He goes, yeah. By 98, I stood up in London and I said, look, our computer shows that Russia's going to collapse. I give it a little more than 30 days. And they put that on the front page of the London Financial Times. So what I learned from dealing with this was that obviously somebody knows when war is going to start. There's always insiders, okay? And they start to move their money in advance. And that's what the computer picks up. So it can't tell me you're doing it versus somebody else. I just see, like in the case of Russia, 100 billion going in, but I see 150 billion coming out. What's interesting here is that reactions in markets tend to be 2 to 3 units a time. So we had the high in oil in 22 and then a 3-year decline into December 25. January, our computer was projecting what we call a panic cycle in oil. Sure enough, it immediately started to rise.
Armstrong's biggest warning is that the world may be entering a long, drawn-out geopolitical cycle, not a quick crisis that resolves in a few weeks. He points to the Middle East, Iran, Russia, Europe, and endless war spending as part of the same debt-driven pattern. Every major conflict adds more borrowing, more interest expense, and more pressure on the financial system. He also connects war risk directly to markets. In past cycles, gold surged not only during inflation but also during sudden geopolitical uncertainty, such as Russia's invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. His point is simple. Markets often move before the public fully understands what is happening because capital begins shifting in advance. Oil's trajectory is a potential flashpoint. Armstrong emphasizes oil hit a major high in 2022 but warns of a 3-year slide into late 2025, with his models signaling a panic cycle as early as 2026. If oil spikes while debt and war risk escalate, inflationary pressures could ignite a disaster at precisely the moment it is least manageable. So the message is clear. Gold, debt, war, and confidence are now connected. Share your thought about this interview in the comment section below. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell icon. Thanks for watching.